General, thanks for talking with me.
Hey, glad to be here. Glad you're here.
Let me just get your first thoughts on the Supreme Court pick from last night.
Pretty encouraged by it. Appears to be a guy in the mold of Scalia himself, of caring about the Constitution, the original intent, the text of what's actually written in statutes. So, very bright guy, has a great background. Obviously served on the 10th Circuit for the last, I think, 10 years. He was 39, so has a great record there defending really the Constitution. So I think it was a great choice.
Does this change your strategy at all? Does this impact Texas in any way?
It impacts us in a big way. We have many, many lawsuits against the federal government, well over 20, that are, a lot of them are constitutionally related. And so to have another judge on that court that actually cares about what the Constitution means and what separation of powers means, which he's written a lot about. He's also written a lot about these agencies run amok and this thing called Chevron deference, where the courts give too much deference to agencies. And he's asked the Supreme Court to consider overturning that. So I think he has some good views that will benefit our state.
What happens until he's confirmed? So we had a 4-4 court until they get 60 votes in the Senate, right?
So the way it works, we've had cases up there where we tied 4-4. So it obviously has an impact. And when you tie 4-4, the lower court, circuit court ruling ends up holding. So it has an impact. I mean, it obviously helps us to have good judges up there.
Will Texas have an easier time, do you think, in court battles?
Yes, I believe they will, because because we're going to have another justice that cares about what the intent of the Constitution is, separation of powers so that each branch of government has their own power, and what statutes actually say, not as opposed to what some other elected official made up about the statute. So having somebody that actually cares about what is in the law really helps us as a state, because we're relying on justices to enforce or to interpret the law as it's written, not as some other person made it up.
What do you think are the big cases that maybe Texans sitting at home would know about that they should pay attention to this because, hey, this case is coming up?
Well, immigration was a huge case. We have our guidelines from the Obama administration on bathrooms. We have a Clean Power Plan, which is a huge EPA case that would cost the country about $27 billion. And if we lose, so those are cases that are pending in different parts of the court system, mostly at the appellate court level. But we have many. I mean, we have like 12 cases against the EPA.
For the immigration case, this is the executive order?
This is the executive order.
Is your office more hopeful that that will not be an issue with this new appointee and the Trump administration?
Well, just to give you an idea, the Justice Department agreed to stay it for a while.
Okay.
And obviously they think I'm guessing they think that we're going to win, because that's one of those that President Trump could undo. He could just rescind it, and we'd win. So, we're hopeful on that one.
That could happen any day, from here until...
It could happen in 2 minutes. So, they've got plenty to do. They've got plenty of things to look at. Obama left them a whole treasure trove of issues to deal with, and they're dealing with them as they hit them.
How does what's happening on the border affect your office?
Well, we have law enforcement officers that are involved down there at times. So we're obviously concerned about border security and threats from terrorism and people crossing our border that could commit crimes. So obviously that does concern us, because we're worried about the law being followed. We're worried about the security and safety of our citizens. So we're hopeful that the legislature will deal with like sanctuary city issues and provide money for border security. But we're also hopeful that Texas at some point won't have to spend so much money, because the federal government is actually stepping up. And you saw the president's executive order where he's going to allow more border agents, more immigration agents, the wall, sanctuary city, defunding for cities that do this. So there's a lot of things at play here that could potentially help Texas, because I've seen some studies that say that illegal immigration costs state up to $12 billion. The wall itself is supposedly only going to cost $10 to $15 billion. So, one-time cost versus this ongoing cost that we're dealing with could be helpful to the state of Texas.
And the only criticism I've seen from Republicans against the wall has been, let's be careful of the private property rights that are along it. What's your role, in making sure that those private property rights are protected with whatever happens with this wall?
So we don't necessarily have a role, but I agree with that. I mean, we should make sure private property rights are protected. And, I'm not sure the wall makes sense along every part of the border. It may make sense in some parts. Maybe more border agents make sense in some parts of technology. I mean, whatever is the most efficient, effective way to protect our citizens from, threats and from drugs, cartels, and from crime, we ought to do.
When it comes to sanctuary cities that you mentioned a little bit earlier, there were Travis County where
Yes.
going through that debate right now. Is your office going to weigh in on any of this?
So we would weigh in. So we don't have any policy. We can't do anything related to policy or passing legislation. But typically, if there's a violation of state law, we can weigh in. Or if for some reason the state needs to file a lawsuit against some particular entity of Travis County, then we might be involved in that. So, but as far as passing anything, we're not involved in any of that.
Because some of the criticism of why we need this law is that Sheriff Hernandez is not complying with federal and state statute. Do you know of anything is that happening right now that you know of?
So, just according to her own statements, there's concerns that she's sworn to uphold the Constitution, and she's obviously supposed to follow state law. So she herself said she wasn't going to turn over criminals who were illegal over to the federal government. Well, that's part of what the law requires, and so there is some concern with me and with the legislature, with the governor, obviously, that she is sworn to uphold the Constitution and state law, and she is saying she's not going to do it. And I don't see any benefit to the citizens of Travis County. What's the upside for them having criminals in their midst that are here illegally when you can have them deported?
Is that a federal purview on this kind of thing, or are you guys investigating if she broke any state laws?
So right now, it would be federal because it's federal law, but I think what the governor has talked about, and we'll see if the legislature is open to it, is potentially removing elected officials from office who don't follow their constitutional duty and their role under state law.
There have been a lot of executive orders from the Trump administration already. What are you watching for as we go forward here? Because that was a major beef of the Obama administration, doing all this stuff by executive orders. Is there lines that he would cross that you would say, hey, you need to not do that?
Sure. So the difference so far, and I read the most recent executive orders on immigration, the Obama executive orders should literally come in and say, the statute now says this. Well, Congress has to change statute. He would just change statutes, like total words and definitions. President Trump has not done that. At least the executive orders that I've read, he directs certain things to happen under federal law, and then and you can read many of them. They say as appropriate under federal law, instead of we're just going to change the law. So there's a big distinction. It's not executive orders that are a problem. It's can the president change what Congress put in place, and that's what Obama decided to do, because after his first 2 years in office, he didn't have a Democratic Congress, and so instead of working with them and negotiating, he didn't want to negotiate. He just would change it.
Are you going to be watching the details of what he'll be doing though? Because he might run into that same problem if he gets 60.
I've been reading the ones that are important to us. So yeah, I sit down and read them because it matters to me what they say. No one's above the law. We want every president, Republican or Democrat, to follow the Constitution. Their role is as an implementer, not a maker of law. That's very important to our constitutional system, whether it's a Republican or Democrat in there. That all matters.
What's just your first thoughts on the refugee ban that Trump did?
So I'm actually a little bit encouraged by it because we sued over that. We were unable to. We sued over the Syrian refugees because they were planting Syrian refugees in here without vetting who they were, and so as Texans, we didn't have any idea whether these people were terrorists or not. They did no vetting, and so I would much rather it be shut down and looked at and make sure that we can vet these people before they put them in our state, and then we don't know where they are. So it was a major concern. That's why we sued. Unfortunately, the federal government has control over that area. But now that President Trump is dealing with it, I'm encouraged that we can protect our citizens better.
General, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.